Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The following program is paid for by Barbara Arnwine.
The topics, views, and opinions expressed on the air and via All Igniting Change with Barbara Arnwine, platforms by host Barbara Arnwine Esquire, guests, and supporters are their own and are independent of any organization, entity. Nothing said on the show or any of its platforms constitutes a client-attorney relationship or serves as legal advice counsel. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to Igniting Change, its platforms, or the show's host. It's time now for Igniting Change, a weekly provocative and empowering program where you, the listener, can ignite change. Now here's your host, Barbara Arnwine.
Get up, stand up for your right.
Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast. Thank you for listening to our show today. Ooh, we got a good show for you because we got so much to talk about. We're going to start off talking about that Supreme Court. Then we're going to go into this whole issue of AI technology in its many forms and its impact on people of color. And what does it forebode for our future? Ooh, we got a lot to talk about. We got some amazing guests, and it's an exciting time for us to be talking today. And so thank you for listening in for the East Coast. Hey, West Coast. Hey, Midwest. We want to give a lot of love and shout out to our South, where I was just at recently in Louisiana. So we're going to talk a whole lot about what's going on in this country. But you know that in order to have a good show, I got to bring up one of those most amazing attorneys in this country. He is chair of the board of the Transformative Justice Coalition, and he is one of our nation's leading civil rights racial justice attorneys. You know who I'm talking about, none other than the Daryl D. Jones. Hey, Attorney Jones.
Hey, Barbara, it must be Tuesday, it must be noon, Eastern Standard Time, because it's time to talk about igniting change. But my goodness, Barbara, the change we're talking about today is just incredible on so many different levels. Whether we're talking about the change with Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, and this U.S. Supreme Court as they're dealing with this Alexander matter, dealing with black votes and black voters, and how they're just completely disrespecting. I don't know any other way to put it, Barbara. Disrespecting the rights of black voters to elect officials, or if now we're even going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the way they're disrespecting the existence of black people. This is just an incredible show we have that's on slate for today, Barbara.
That's right. You know, and most people, I know you're saying artificial intelligence, AI, technology. Yes, most of our racial justice shows don't talk about these issues. But we're igniting change, right? And we have to talk about what's going on because we must understand how does this impact our futures, your children's future? How do we make sure that there's a world in which everybody is racially equal and in which all of the systems, all of the economic structures are working not to disadvantage people of color, but to advance black folks and others in this country and to make us truly have the equity that we deserve. So let's talk about, today, Daryl, I just was in Louisiana. Actually, my family did a tour of the state capitol. So I was at the scene of the crime because, as you have heard from our other show of last couple of weeks where we've been talking about Louisiana's racist redistricting and the victory that the Legal Defense Fund and ACLU and other lawyers were able to eke out for the plaintiffs in that case. We had Dr. Press Robinson on, and he talked about how he had, at 85 years old, why he was still in this battle and how he had throughout history, since 1963, had to become a voter and when he became a voter, how he had to pass a literacy test, people. Yes. Don't have people telling you that's ancient, that's over, that's end times, all the rest of it. No. He's 85 years old and still out there fighting for justice. And they won. They finally were able to win after several federal courts said, listen, this is just, a racist map, and it denies the African Americans, who are 40% of the Louisiana population, the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice by making it overwhelmingly these districts white and Republican. So as a consequence, they lost that case. But then immediately after that loss, a number of, quote, non-black people, I love that, non-African American people, filed a lawsuit saying that the redistricting that was done and approved by the state legislature was unconstitutional on the basis of race, and that it was a racial gerrymander. So they took the same theory and twisted it on its head. But as we found out from our show 2 weeks ago, a lot of the people who filed that lawsuit didn't even live in the district. They had no standing to even raise the question. They had no injury. But the court was that particular court, split 2-3, was so intent on dismantling African American rights that they found for them anyway. Even though the law was against them, even though the facts were against them, it was ugly. And this case, of course, went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did the right thing. Well, a lot of us said, well, what does that mean if they did the right thing in the Louisiana case? What are they going to do? Why are they still sitting on the South Carolina case, which was argued way back in October? And now, folks, they issued a decision last week, another day of infamy. We'll be talking forever about this decision in Alexander versus the South Carolina State Conference of the NAACP, rendered and decided on May 23rd of 2024. It's a 6-3 decision. Six of the, of course, let's call them conservative, to be polite, members of the court decided that this particular map, wherein they had moved every single district that was predominantly black, they had moved every single one of them into a new district where they would be totally outnumbered, that this was not a unconstitutional gerrymander, and Daryl, evilly, what a lot of people may be missing in this case is that it revived the whole controversy that we thought we had staunched 2 years ago in the Moore case. It revived the whole state legislative theory, because in fact, the beginning of the decision says the Constitution entrusts state legislatures with the primary responsibility for drawing congressional districts, and legislative redistricting is an inescapably political enterprise. Then it goes on to say that they've already said in the Rucho case that you should not be, that the federal courts should not interfere when it's a partisan gerrymander. But you had to show that race was the absolute predominant factor. Daryl, when you heard about this case, how did you react to it, this horrible decision? Because it's going to undermine our political rights all over the country.
Now, Barbara, you know I can't use those types of words on the radio, but I'll tell you. When I heard what the justices had done in the South Carolina case, really breaking it down, what they're saying is that they're going to leave black voters to the states in which they live in for the legislatures to deal with them. So if you're in the state of South Carolina and they've redistricted the black vote such that it becomes meaningless in terms of trying to elect black elected officials, that they're not going to get involved in that. That's just politics being politics. It's okay. Don't worry about it, black folks. Live with it. Figure it out. That's what the Supreme Court is saying here in this Alexander decision. So when I hear Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, and their conservative friends that are on the court that are laying this out, it becomes so upsetting because you put that next to the conversation, Barbara, that you had just been talking about with the gentleman, our 85-year-old gentleman who has been on the battlefield.
Yes.
Right. Brother Robinson, Dr. Robinson has been on the field all that time. And again, it's a slap in the face. It's saying, forget all that you've done to move forward with the progress for votes in the African American community. We're saying we're not going to get involved. Barbara, one of the key reasons that the Supreme Court and all court systems exist is to serve as a check on the legislative and executive branches of government. What the Supreme Court did in this South Carolina case is they're saying, well, legislature, you do whatever you want to do, and if somebody wants to bring a suit against you, well, we're going to give you the presumption that what you did is in good faith. Now, y'all overcome that. We're saying that the legislature acted in good faith. They didn't act for a racial-based reason. Y'all figure out how to overcome it. And it's almost impossible to overcome, Barbara, so it's incredibly upsetting to see what the Supreme Court has done and to tag along with that. What did we just talk about? The ethics problem of this court. It continues to be on display, Barbara. It continues to be on display.
But wait a minute. But Daryl, it's worse than that. Folks, who do you think wrote this decision? The very justice of the Supreme Court that we were talking about last week for his unethical, bizarre, partisan behavior, none other than Samuel Alito. He is the author of this disingenuous, untruthful, wrong-headed Plessy versus Ferguson-style decision. We won't have it. Folks, listen, this is why we must vote. It's why we must pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, because it would take away this presumption of good faith, because it would look at these states that have a horrible history, like South Carolina, of constantly engaging in racial gerrymandering, constantly denying its black folks the right to vote. Remember, Press Robinson, his first vote was in South Carolina. And he talked about how his mother and father had never been able to vote, and how he stood in that line and had to take a literacy test in 1963 in order to vote. And his mother was right behind him, and she had constantly been up there trying to register to vote, and they had been giving her making her look at jars full of jelly beans and trying to tell how many jelly beans were in a jar, and had gone through all that madness. We are talking about the same South Carolina, but the beauty of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is that it would change this situation. The beauty of the Freedom to Vote Act is that it would directly address these redistricting questions and make sure that racial gerrymanders cannot happen, and would address partisan gerrymandering and make sure that it doesn't happen. So this is why we got to stand up, people. When we have a defeat like this, something this horrible that happens, where you're Justice Thomas. Whoa, Daryl, we just got to mention it. I know we got to get on to the full show, but Justice Thomas wrote a concurrence, people. That means he wrote a separate opinion saying he agreed with the major opinion, but he wanted to point out that he disagreed with the fact that they didn't strike down the entirety of the Voting Rights Act, that he thinks the whole act shouldn't exist, that he believes that there should be no federal intervention